Hello. I thought I'd make a video. Well, I said I'd make a video. It's in response, not the previous video, but the one before that, entitled Tree of Life, Tree of Knowledge, in which I compared the human body and the similarity it has to trees. And I pinned a comment, and I'm going to read the comment and then respond to it, because I feel it's valid in so many ways. Anyway, I won't sort of spoil it, as it were. I'll just read it to you. I quote, "Come on, James, you still conceptualize yourself into master and servant and creator and created beings. I can still sense you are feared of death. Please break it. We are the one creator and responsible of ourselves. Why do you care about your husk? Why do you fear about reincarnation? Is it not wonderful or joyful experience that source never can take by being void?" Now, this is the type of comment I really love. It's thought-provoking. So, where do we start here? First off, why do you care about your husk? I care about the husk because it is the vehicle in which to have this experience here. So it's not just about my husk, it's about all of our husks. Because ideally we want them in very healthy peak performance condition in which to get the greatest benefit. Why do you fear about reincarnation? In answering this question, it also answers the earlier one about conceptualization of into master and servant and creator and created beings. Yes, I do that. You see, this series of questions, straight away I have to turn these inward and ask myself, is this true? Is it the other person's opinion? Well, I do agree with some of what you're saying, and it's always interesting to see how I come across in videos and has it helped. So I'm very grateful for these questions. Why do you fear about reincarnation? Okay. We'll go with that one. I don't actually fear reincarnation. Now, here's the reason why. I go with what Neville Goddard says, based on the fact that what I've heard Neville Goddard say, and in audio readings, Brian Scott channel, for example. There's a playlist on this channel entitled Neville Goddard. I found it to be true for myself. Now, Neville Goddard talks about reincarnation, that you come back at the age of 20, and there's a seamless backstory from childhood onwards. He says you only do it once. I cannot say yes or no to that. I cannot prove it one way or the other. If it was seamless, how could you? So I'll go with that. I'm open to that idea. It certainly creates an ease inside it, because if there is any sort of little fear, as it were, it's coming from the lower I, that and obviously comparing to the past and not wanting to go through the education system and feeling at odds with the world and that type of thing. It's like, oh, do I have to do that all again? It's that sort of thing. So it's from a mortal perspective with that. But then going with what Neville says, it wouldn't actually matter. Where are we? Yeah, so I haven't actually answered it yet. Ah, yes, here we are. I can still sense you are feared of death. Please break it. No. I'll tell you why. The fear of death, again, is the lower I. Now, think in terms of a parent here. If it's a very young child and they're in the garden and one of the parents is watching, now I feel it would be very harsh if that child was about to put themselves in danger that they're not aware of and the parent goes up and goes smack. That would be like ridiculous. Far better it's like, no, come here, Johnny. We call the little child Johnny for the purpose of this. And you sort of distract them with something else and take them away from that danger. So then it's apply it to this lower I consciousness and say, look, where are we? I've lost myself. So the lower consciousness, the false persona part, yeah, it is, of course it's fearful. And if we're really honest, who would want to go through a horrific, slow, painful death, something like torture, or your limbs are severed off and it's excruciating agony, you're aware that you're dying slowly? I don't think anybody would really envisage or want that to happen to them. Ideally, it would be you go to sleep and separation of spirit from matter, and the physical body remains there in the bed, and you're sort of separated from it and just very peaceful and no harm at all. So it's applying that more gentle parent thing and saying, look, I've got this. You've got nothing to worry about. I acknowledge that you have the fear. See, this is, I feel, is where I can also answer the conceptualization of into master and servant. So that's like your higher self talking to your lower self, your feelings. You're acknowledging yourself, the creator and the created beings. Well, what the lower I side of you is creating is fears of things. So they are created beings. And of course, if they're focused on, they do take on a sort of life, and then they can sort of take control of the entire vessel, the entire body, and run on irrational negative programs. I've said on previous videos that I've identified using the 12 cranial nerves, and I've described as like the fearsome temper as I've called it Beethoven. It's taking what the external world is showing, like with the tree, for example, it branches out. So for me to fully understand myself and that know thyself, then I want to spread myself out, separate myself into these different parts, but all these different characters. It turns it into a game. It's no different from the external world, where the first time you meet somebody, they're a stranger, you don't recognize them because you've never seen them before. But next time your eyes will take a sort of photograph, as it were, of their facial features, and you'll recognize them the next time you see them, hopefully. And you can do this within oneself. So I never said on video the names or anything, or described these 12 characters, because it's not even relevant. But it would be like knowing the feeling that comes with each star sign without knowing its zodiac name. You just recognize it So the please break it, it's dissolving it, because the more that I sort of spread myself out inside myself, I've got room to maneuver, as it were, in a sort of metaphorical sense. And I can recognize aspects of myself, and I can acknowledge all these different things. So it's like, well, do I come across that I have a fear of death? Well, I think I've just answered that anyway. Now this is this comes on really to structure, and this is how we communicate within ourselves. So I'm really glad that you've raised this question, because it's prompted a bit of, it's been thought-provoking, which is beautiful. This is just off the top of the head as it comes, so I apologise if it seems a little disjointed, because I want to answer it all in one go, you see, because I'm feeling energised again. I'll come on to that if there's time towards the end. Yeah, so do I care about the husks? Yes, I know I've sort of partly answered that. We're here to have an experience, so I wish it to be a far more pleasant experience for all of us. So that's why I care about the husk. While we're having this experience here, enjoy it. Let's transform it into something that's more agreeable, shall we say. Yeah, so it's how you talk to yourself. Now, if you were to say, oh, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want that to happen. I'm not using specifics because it's then putting it out into the ether. It's causing a vibration. So this is just purely analogy. So if I'm saying I do not want X, the subconscious doesn't hear words like not and no. So what that's actually hearing is I do want. And it hears the feeling that you're generated from, say, from fear, that, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. I really don't want that to happen to me. That type of thing. So you're pulling, it's a negative magnetism that's now being pulled. And of course, the thing that you really don't want to happen, you've actually created. So it's the structure. So the way I would communicate anything across to the subconscious from the conscious mind would be to say, take for example, I'll give it a couple of specifics. Being beheaded, or a horrific car accident. I would be inclined to structure it as, I feel there are far more pleasant ways to go out of this physical body. I wouldn't even focus on those, say, in any shape or form, because you're starting to give an energy to it. And if you give too much energy to something from focusing on it, it solidifies in the mind, which in turn will solidify in the objective external. Also, on the point of the separation of self, it's also this awareness that there's the internal self and then the interaction with the external, because we are walking two worlds. So it's an acknowledgement of the duality of the internal and the external, and getting that structure of the dialogue going on inside. I mean, it's talked about in terms of water, which we mostly are, about restructuring water. Well, the the brain is 73% fluid. The heart is 73% fluid. The lungs are 83% fluid. So breathing, of course, is going to come into this, because that's the only way you can communicate with the rest of the body. You can't communicate directly with the liver or the kidneys or the heart or anything else, but you can through the breathing. And because they're 83% water, there's what I've said before about water being the, not holding memory, but the medium, or one of the mediums in which the communication can travel. So restructuring yourself, you're restructuring the flow inside yourself as well. So I feel you do have to sort of separate yourself into these different things, being the observer of the physical being the observer of all these little things that come up, these 12 cranial nerves, 12 sort of emotional states, and just acknowledging them. You don't want to suppress them, because they just grow and become bigger and bigger. Just because you've ignored them, you've not addressed them. It's all about facing things within oneself. So when these things come up, I find it far easier to caricaturize these emotions, just to make them easier to spot. I think we're going round in circles here, but it's because I think I'm repeating myself. But there again, it is repetition that gets these things in. Now, what came up on my sort of YouTube home thing was a Neville Goddard lecture called "The Feeling is the Secret." It's an audiobook. It's only an hour long. It's one of the best hours you could ever spend, in my opinion. I found it has definitely worked for me. It's how I get through daily life, by putting this into practice. Because feeling is how we do communicate with inside ourselves, and of course then it goes beyond. Incidentally, Ken Wheeler has done a beautiful video on, I think it's entitled Magnetism Explained and Simplified. And he basically gives you the answer in that, in a slightly different way, comparing a 5-watt light bulb to a 5-watt laser, the difference in the two, because one is point source. The laser is point source, and it can do a lot of damage. It is, and therefore it also has a lot of power. Well, consider, we are magnetic beings. If we are point source energy, just think about the potential of what we really do have inside ourselves. Another Neville Goddard lecture talks about going down to the potter's house, and you've got all the references to humanity being like clay. One moment. And we're back. Right, so we're like clay. Now, imagine you're a potter. It's your first time. You're going to make a plate. The first time might not be very good. Or you might say, oh, that's terrible. So you sort of reform the clay, you reshape it, and of course, in that process, there's water. There's that flow of water again. And then with practice, you can make far more elaborate designs and things, and you get better and better at making these things just through the practice, through the experience of it all. Because that's how we learn. Alternatively, if you're put off by the sort of references to biblical passages, firstly I'd address why you're being triggered by that. and just listen to what Neville was saying. But there's always ways around these things. Be wise as serpents. So it's like that S on between the yin and the yang. So you can perceive something as an obstacle, or you can find a way around it. Well, try Lana A LaBonte. She's reading a book called The Invitation. Now, I've only listened to chapter 1 so far, but it's basically another way of expressing the same thing, and about doing the inner work, addressing ourselves, turning ourselves into that point source magnetism, basically. It's doing that inner work, just like as Ken Wheeler said, you turn that ceramic coated rock, it's reconfigured inside and becomes a magnet. Likewise, we have to reform ourselves, reshape ourselves internally, create new neural pathways. See, I could have gone in with a lower I conscious, because it did come up and wanting to defend against this comment. But that's just the lower I sort of, how dare you? I now need to defend myself. No, I don't feel like I need to defend myself. What I got out of it was, this is like a gift. This is, you've given me something to talk about in a video, which I feel is vitally important to talk about. And as Julia on Simplicity Revealed channel said in her last video, no one can do it for you. So in some ways it is talking about concepts, but it's because that's the only way it is only a concept to the one that hears it. But if it's coming from the experience, it is authentic, and this is what I'm giving you. For the record, I try to be very specific, like if it's, well, I've read this or I've seen this, but of course it's come from a channel on YouTube, I would say that. If it's something that I haven't experienced, I would say, well, I think it is, or from my perception, this is what it appears to be. I probably have in the past, but I'm not going to put things across as facts if I don't know them to be facts, if I don't know them to be true. It's got to be from hand on heart with all of these things. It has to come from the heart. That is the point source. That's where all the energy comes from. And because we are like magnets, if you think of inside the human body, the true essence, the real you is the dielectric, the potential. But then what we create with the thoughts becomes the magnetism. What we focus on is that loss of energy where it's going out from us. So it's like this structured water. You sort of turn yourself into a crystallized form in a way. I feel that we will go through that. It will be a case of, well, there's the physical body. That was nice knowing you. It was a nice experience, but we are not these bodies. We're programmed into believing and convinced that we are these physical beings, but we're not. They're just here for the purposes of being here. It makes perfect sense that if you have a physical realm, you need a physical vehicle to operate within that realm. As I said before, you couldn't experience and know what coffee tastes like, for example, unless you can physically pick up a cup and actually experience drinking coffee. How would you know? So hopefully that has addressed and expanded, and it's benefited some of you from talking about this. So finally on this one, Is it not wonderful or a joyful experience that source can never have by being void? Well, I think I've just answered that, but the void, that is something I can talk about. It's, if you can imagine black velvet, almost like a black soup-like consistency in a way, you can see perfectly clearly, but when I say see, you're not aware of having a physical body at the same time. And time. How long was I in the void for? From a mortal linear time conception, it would probably see a long time, but in the void, there is no time. I couldn't tell you if it was 5 seconds or 500 million years. I really don't know. Or somewhere, it's there and then it's not. It's tranquil and beautiful. I've also seen it as just totally white and the same feeling. It's sitting in the eye of the storm, as it were. And then you can push all the clutter and noise further and further away. You're stretching out even in that, in those, because there is no external, was it Cartesian, oh dear, I can't think of the words. There's no physical dimensions to it. It can't be measured. It's outside of this physical realm, and yet it's not outside because it's inside. So yes, we are one, but we're like Humpty Dumpty. We're fractalized aspects of one, and that is how one experiences so much. By one is fractalized into oneself. So we can look at things at all different angles and have all different experiences. And you're sort of like reporting back to your greater self, our collective whole. And then we're like the messengers, we're going backwards and forwards and then coming back again and having another experience, and depending on what we've had before will determine what we have next time. But of course it's not linear time. Again, as Neville Goddard says, you may find yourself reincarnated, and it may be, I don't know, 2,000 years ago or whatever, or Middle Ages or something. Who knows? Or you could be, your next life may be in the future, or it may be in the past, but it's not. It's all within this, although you can't see it. It's different frequencies, just same as if you look at a radio. Between that 87 and 108 UHF, it's sort of all, say, within that band on different frequencies. Excuse me. But if you open up onto, you're more open and start changing onto higher frequencies, that external will match that frequency, as it were. You'll draw things towards you on that same vibration. So the experiences that you have and the things that you see are not necessarily all going to be identical. Things will be shown to you in the mind's eye, as it were, in ways that you can comprehend, because it'll know the level of your experience and what you can compare to. It can read you just like that, as it were. And so if you were comfortable with it, you would see things shown in maybe a form of what most people would call Jesus. Another person that wouldn't suit, so it would appear in something, I don't know, maybe it's a druid or a Odin or something. It's whatever feels right to you. And this is the other thing, as a final note here. We've got 5 defined senses in this reality, but those of you that are getting, like, should we say, downloads, I'm sure you realise that you can sort of hear it, you can see it, and you can feel it. It's not something that's defined into the five senses. It's beyond that, so it's difficult to quantify, and therefore makes this a challenge to even try and explain in readily accepted terms, because everything is subject to compartmentalization and labels, so it makes it more of a challenge. But how beautiful it all is. So thank you so much, and I welcome any sort of critique type questions, because that benefits me as much as anything else. So I welcome that, and it's great to sort of have that sort of inner knowing of, oh, there's a sort of ego defense thing wanting to come up, and there's another bit that another emotion coming up, and it's like, this is good. And then deep questions. So hopefully I've answered those. And no, I don't. I have the lower I feelings, which are quite natural. We're in a natural nature realm, whatever it might be. But we call it nature. Again, it's just labels, isn't it? But wow, thank you, and I hope you're all having a beautiful day. The energies, if you're still feeling like, oh, heavy energy, it is the next 2, 3, 4 days, you'll start to feel an uplift. We're in the year of the water rabbit. Well, water is emotions. The rabbit is like trying to jump up in the air, and it's associated with spring. I have this feeling that this spring, especially the spring equinox, it's going to spring us all forward in a very positive way. Depending on what your vibrational level is going to be determine probably how awesome it will feel, but it will match your vibration. But there's no judgment of whether it's good or bad, because you're at the level, or you're at the point on your path where you're meant to be. It's actually like clockwork, you could say, but not like clockwork. It's not mechanical. It's just absolutely perfect. It really is. And I hope that you can feel it, and then see it, and then be able to look round and, wow, yeah, I really appreciate this experience. It really is fantastic. That's just how I feel. I can't speak for anybody else. So love to you all until the next video.